sets of comments I had here this morning. First, that of the president of ECOWAS, who talked about the outcomes. Why democracy? What do we seek from democracy? Democracy must provide results. The second, the intervention from Bishop Kuka even made the case that rather than focus on democracy as an academic construct, why not let us think of democracy as a system of governance that should produce results for people, that should also have elements of accountability so that if we're not getting these results, we can go back and ask why. I now pivot into the 3 points I need to make. First, that when we think of democracy on the continent, on the African continent, let's think about the reality we face on our continent today. And I can summarize 3. The first is abject poverty. How can democracy be reconstructed to address the issues of poverty? What do we need to do at the base to organize ourselves, organize governments, such that we can now undertake the things we need to facilitate economic growth and productivity to pull our people out of poverty? The second challenge we have on the continent, which we must address, and I think it's Dr. Emmanuel Ate who started talking about that, is the issue of demographics. The population of the continent is very youthful. Our population is doubling every generation on the continent. Today, the continent has about 1.3 billion people, and in another 30 years, it's likely to double. And that means for a long time, you're going to have very many young people on the continent. So if democracy is about catering to the interest of the majority of people in a place, then the conversation we should be having today should really be not just focused on, but nurtured by the people who are going to be affected mostly by our democratic practices. But here we are. Today, fathers, grandfathers are the ones talking and advocating for democracy. The people who will benefit from this democracy, the children, are not being inculcated in that conversation. The third issue facing us on the continent is that of migration. For whatever reasons, climate, poor governance, difficult economies, a lot of African talent is leaving the continent for abroad. And this phenomenon is changing the social relations on the continent. I recall when I was contesting my re-election as governor, the contributions from the diaspora remittances, diaspora participation, largely influenced the outcome of my election. So the role of the African diaspora cannot and should not be ignored as we rethink the restructuring or how we get our people to participate in the democracy on the continent. I guess I will take questions after this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Answering the question, why are the younger people or youths on the continent getting impatient about democracy? I think for a lot of the young people on the continent, they just feel that they are not heard. So if you say you're practicing democracy and they don't feel as if they are participating, they watch how elections are held, the outcomes of elections, but ultimately they don't see their lives getting better. They are not able to afford, the cost of the goods and services. But more importantly, they can't see hope for the future. You say, oh, you are the leaders of tomorrow. And they say, okay, what are we going to lead? Are we going to lead poverty? So So I think that's where we should really focus our conversations on democracy on, which is that let us look at our reality. The reality is that 70% of the people on this continent of Africa are under the age of 35. And I do not know if 20% of those under the age of 35 are participating in governance in any form. And that needs to change. Those are the things we need to focus on. Yes, you say they are on social media, they are on TikTok, and they are talking. That is not participation. Yes, they say they vent their frustrations, but all that venting is not reflected in the outcomes of governance, what they have to deal with in their daily lives. So, recommendations, I will say, look, let's, rather than continue to talk theoretically about democracy, let's utilize those embedded tools in democracy to address the yearnings of the larger population on the continent. And what are these? First, giving them a sense of belonging, of participation, of involvement, and also begin to explain to them the difference between the exercise of power and the benefits of that come out of power, which is governance. The fact that you have won an election, the fact that you are a member of the House of Assembly or whatever, does not mean that you have the tools to carry out activities that will make my life better. And I'm not interested in whatever you say you are or whatever power position you occupy, if that position does not benefit me, or I cannot see my progress, as you exercise that power.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sir, you have been in the system. I'll just stay with you. You have been in the system. You were elected governor of your state. Is there anything that you would do differently in terms of, some of the issues that you've talked about? If you had another chance, what would you do differently?
What I will do again is to focus more on how to use political power to deliver socio-economic goods for the citizens. What you find on the continent, and I'm sure, many people who have been, in power, particularly executive power, will tell you, is that the fact that you are in charge, the fact that you're a president or you're a governor, does not necessarily mean that you'll be able to deliver, services to your people. There are state structures, the public service, there's, there are a whole slew of structures of governance that must work to enable you who now have political power to actually deliver service to your citizens. Political power alone does not confer all the benefits the citizens want automatically. These structures need to be built, particularly your public services, the civil service, the public services, those organs of government that are expected to provide those services, education, health, infrastructure, right? Yes, you can talk about the big issues of corruption at the top, that if you had a bit more transparency, you'll see how the money flows through. But do you have the capacity within the organs of state to deliver? So my advice is, yes, it's important to focus on elections, getting the right people into power, but what we should also be emphasizing now is how to support those who are in power to actually deliver on the promises that they have made to people. And sometimes they're not able to because the tools are not there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Susan, let's come to you. Let's kind of throw it forward. What does African democracy?
Democracy is unique to the particular, people or the particular country that's practicing it. You don't expect the same, the democracy will be practiced the same way across all the nations on the continent. However, there are some common underlying principles that must be observed for you to have, a democracy that continues to thrive. And that delves into the question asked by, the second person, which is how do we bridge the gaps? Democracy in itself, if you practice it, in the way it should create spaces, should create civic spaces for people to be able to communicate, to be able to discuss, to exchange ideas. That's why we politicians, in seeking for office, go around campaigning. That's why you have opposition parties who are, proffering alternative views. If you practice democracy in whatever form, upholding these principles, then over time, you are likely to make progress and bridge the gaps. But for me, the landing point for me is, look, at the end of the day, is this system, am I better off with this system of government, with this democracy, the way it has been practiced in my domain? That's the underlying question. If I am better off, then okay, I continue to make improvements. If I am not, then what do I do? Still working within the ambits, the principles underlying on which democracy rests, to change or to improve, my democratic form of government.
So I'm proud to say this is the immediate past governor of Edo State, still representing Edo State even in a global stage. This was a seminar that was held in Ghana, speaking about the democracy dialogue. And Obaseki was opportune to be there with other big names in the politics around Africa. Also, Mr. Peter Obi was also there. If there is one thing that I would say I miss Obaseki for, is each time there when he was the governor, when I switch on my TV set, I always see him as he addressing people. If there is anything that I miss, it is that particular thing, that he will always have an opportunity to address people on how they are making their policies, the next step they are taking in governance. If I wish the current governor, which is distinguished Senator Monday Okpebholo, at least, if not in a global stage, representing Edo in a global stage, if at least he can be coming up even in our local television, if he can be coming up to be telling us their policies, what they are doing, I will appreciate it. As it's a thing of pride when you see an Edo person in a global stage representing the people. It's a thing of pride. I don't know what you think, but this is what I think. I remember those days when I would sit on my TV set just to listen to Obaseki. Let me see what he have up there. And you can see the speech that he just delivered. It is quite amazing. Thank you. God bless.